is Hockeytahn, presented by McDonald's new McCafe coffees. I'm loving it.
For those who don't live in Pittsburgh, they may think that it's just another town. But for those who do, Pittsburgh is a hockey town, or as the locals like to say, Hockeytahn. Now, the city first started producing steel in the late 1800s, and while it would be known for that for many years, the sport of hockey was introduced at about the same time, in the same place. It has created a lot of history in the time since, history that began in Oakland. Today, it's a part of the campus at the University of Pittsburgh, but back then, it was the Schenley Park Casino.
The casino itself was a very ornate building. It was styled in Spanish Renaissance architecture, Palladian windows, 1,500 incandescent lights inside, gorgeous oak paneling. It was quite the rage.
That rage also included a huge ice skating service, something that casino manager James Conant felt was a must before the facility was built. Initially, it was used for recreational skating, though a form of hockey polo was being played. That changed when a group of students from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario announced they were coming to town in December of that same year.
For the Pittsburgh people who've been playing ice polo, they'd never seen a hockey puck. And the papers wrote all about it the next day, and they loved what they saw out of that game.
That created additional buzz at the casino. A new facility and a new sport sparked new interest, and a few Canadians were happy to add to it.
For a young Canadian player, he saw Pittsburgh as an opportunity to get preseason conditioning done. They would come here in November, play a season that lasted until late December, usually go home around Christmas time, and those players would be well prepared for the start of their real season when they played in Quebec and Ontario.
Unfortunately, the excitement did not last long. On December 17, 1896, a fire burned the casino to the ground just 18 months after it opened, though hockey would not go away. In fact, thanks to Christopher McGee, it would not go far at all.
It was a multi-purpose facility. They had boxing, bicycle events, rodeos, county fair type activities there, but they also had a large flat surface where they could put an ice facility in, and they did that.
That's where Pittsburgh really cut its teeth and as a huge power in American hockey. And it was. Pittsburgh was right there with Boston and Duluth as the hotbeds of hockey in the United States. And Duquesne Gardens is where it all happened.
McGee spent about $500,000 to convert the Duquesne Traction Company into the Gardens. The old trolley barn became one of the first arenas to showcase artificially made ice. Later, it's believed that an early model Zamboni took the surface there, and glass would eventually replace wire above the boards. But it all started in 1899 when the Pittsburgh Athletic Club battled Western University in the first hockey game, and that was followed by another first 2 years later thanks to former Pittsburgh Keystone Harry Peel.
He admitted that he was paid roughly $35 a week to be a player on the Keystone's team. This set a firestorm across the Ontario hockey clubs and the Quebec teams that one player was actually paid money to play here in Pittsburgh.
If you were deemed a professional, or if you had even played against professionals, you were banned from many leagues in Canada, from basically most leagues in Canada at that time. So players who were banned, or who thought they would like to earn some money playing hockey and not just play as an amateur, Pittsburgh was one of the great places for them to go.
The Gardens continued to welcome amateurs and later professionals with several teams in several leagues. Now, while it was thought by some that the first professional hockey game was played in Michigan in 1907, it did not seem to affect things in Oakland, at least until 1910.
The pros were winning the battle for hockey in Canada, and teams were now, pro teams and pro leagues were now forming in Canada. So the Canadians who had come down had gone to Duluth and St. Paul and to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan to play, or they'd come to Pittsburgh to play. they no longer needed to leave home to draw a salary playing hockey.
While professional hockey had cooled in the area, one of America's greatest players would bring excitement to Pittsburgh's third artificial ice surface, the Winter Garden at the Point in 1917. Hobie Baker and a group of all-stars played an exhibition game on a 300-foot by 140-foot sheet of ice. He would not disappoint, producing a hat trick in a 3-2 overtime win, a showing that proved to be more significant after Baker lost his life in a plane crash on December 21st, 1918.
We cannot find any record of him playing hockey after he played here in Pittsburgh. In terms of a competitive game, it was a competitive game. It was an organized game. It wasn't involved with a league per se. But the great American hockey star quite possibly played his last game in Pittsburgh.
Amateur hockey would surface again at Duquesne Gardens with the Yellow Jackets, who were owned by Roy Schooley. The former referee also had an eye for talent. He put together the roster of the first U.S. men's Olympic ice hockey team in 1920, which trained in Pittsburgh before settling for a silver medal at the Games. Schooley would later bring Canada's Lionel Conacher to town, a man who possessed several talents.
Probably his worst game was baseball, but he was said to be the best player on his team. An incredible, he was a running back in playing football, probably an even better lacrosse player. He had sparred with Jack Dempsey. He had been offered a contract sight unseen by the Boston Red Sox. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens were both trying to get him to turn pro. This guy was incredible.
The Big Train would lead the Yellow Jackets to back-to-back amateur titles in 1924 and 25, but financial problems forced Schooley to sell the team to James Callahan, who, with the approval of Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss, changed the team name to the Pirates and moved them to the pro ranks of the National Hockey League. Conacher and most of the Yellow Jackets would make the jump as well, and on December 2nd, 1925, the first NHL game in Pittsburgh was played at Duquesne Gardens. In 1928, the Pirates would be sold again, this time to Benny Leonard, who had a little help when it came to paying the bills.
There were many reports at the time, although it really was never substantiated at that point, that the real money behind Benny Leonard was coming from a bootlegger named Bill O'Dwyer. And Bill O'Dwyer was the owner of the New York Americans, of the National Hockey League. So you can imagine that he didn't want the league to know that it was actually his money that was behind Benny Leonard. And actually some of the Quakers later, many years later, said everybody on the team knew that O'Dwyer was really the owner of the club and that Benny Leonard was just the manager.
Leonard moved the club to Philadelphia, where they became the Quakers for the 1930 campaign. The Great Depression only magnified the problems the team faced on the ice, and with just 4 wins, the Quakers would cease operations in 1931. A second version of the Jackets and a one-and-done season by the Shamrocks in 1936 did not give fans much hope for hockey until John Harris entered the picture.
Harris combined the Detroit Olympics, the Pittsburgh Shamrocks, and the Pittsburgh Yellow Jackets and started an AHL team. It was the International American Hockey Association that later became the AHL.
With a minor league affiliation to the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Hornets quickly grew in popularity, and fans were not disappointed with the level of play they saw on the ice.
Right here in Pittsburgh is where Tim Horton got his start. It's where George Armstrong, kind of cut his professional teeth. Also Sid Smith, who became a very consistent 20-30 goal man for the Toronto Maple Leafs, had a 100-point season here playing for the Pittsburgh Hornets.
The NHL had 6 teams at the time, so there was a premium on positions. You had to be really good to crack the NHL lineup. And the guys who weren't quite good enough were excellent hockey players, and they were playing here for the Hornets.
The squad was so popular, it even drew the interest of Steelers owner Art Rooney. But the Chief decided not to get into the business of another sport at the time. The Hornets would win 3 Calder Cup championships, and while the team vanished for 5 seasons after the Gardens closed in 1956, they resurfaced with the opening of the Civic Arena in 1961. The National Hockey League then decided it would return to Pittsburgh in 1967 with the expansion Penguins. Knowing that things would soon end for good, the Hornets went out in style by winning the Calder Cup in the same fashion.
19 seconds into overtime, Pittsburgh's Billy Harris scored a goal. Overtime, Calder Cup clinching goal. The very last goal in Hornets history. It was a walk-off winner in many respects. It was the last for that season, for the playoffs, for the franchise.